For that excellent introduction to the great British parliamentary style. Unfortunately, our club president, who's also British, couldn't make it here today because he had to attend a wedding. It's not his wedding though, so there's still one crate left on the market at least. Alright, so let's go over just the basics of how the night is going to go on. So we're going to start with the opening speeches by our four presenters. They're going to last 6 minutes long, and the objective of that is just to sort of lay the groundwork, the principles behind that everybody is going to argue about as we go forward. So after they're done with that, we're going to move on to the open floor period of the debate. And that's when anybody can get up and give a speech. Your speech can last up to 5 minutes. There's no notes in anything. Well, I'm not breaking the rules because the debate hasn't started yet. So yeah. We'll do open floor. One thing, points of order. If you think somebody is using notes or something like that, where it's just like insulting somebody, you can get up just like you would if you're going to give a speech. You would get up, the chair would say, all right, you're recognized. They would probably say like, the man in black right there is recognized or something like that. Then you could say, hey, they're using notes. And you could say, oh, they are using notes. You have to sit down. All right, so after the open floor period of the debate, we'll move on to what we call the lightning round. And, oh, I forgot to mention, in the open floor, at the end of your speech, you can choose to take questions if you want. You can take up to 2 questions. The questions themselves can only last a minute, so it has to be brief, and there's no back and forth with the questions. This isn't a Socratic dialogue, this is a debate. So yeah, we're trying to win. So yeah, no back and forth, and we're going to be a bit stricter on that than we were last time. So right, in the lightning round, your speech can last 2 minutes, that's after the open floor. So you get up and take your speech for 2 minutes, and in the lightning round, there's no questions. So the lightning round is great for if you just have a couple points to make, or you, I don't know, you just don't feel like you're comfortable taking questions or whatever, so that's a good round for you. And after that, we'll move on to the concluding speeches by our 4 presenters. So they'll make a conclusion, and we'll move on to voting. We'll actually vote and see, do we think marijuana should be legalized in all 50 states? Alright, so I'm going to briefly introduce our 4 presenters. We have, on the affirming side, we have Dr. Matthew Geringer, who is the professor of psychology right here at Franciscan University. Say hi. And his debate partner is Mr. Dylan Sherman. Senior political science major, so hopefully he'll do pretty well. Now for the opposing side, we have Dr. Kyle McKenna, who's an associate biology professor. And his debating partner, Miss Ava Montes, who's a sophomore English and writing major. And last but not least, we have our chairman, Mr. Goudreau. You can refer to him as Mr. Chairman. He is a pre-engineering major and he's also a sophomore.
All right, so as Daniel said, it's on? Okay, it's on. All right, so I'm John Paul Boudreau, otherwise known as Mr. Chairman for tonight. I'd like to introduce my assistant, Gavin. When he talks, please don't. He doesn't. So during the open floor period, when you have a minute left, I'll give you a minute warning. And during the lightning round, you'll have 30-second warning. After that, I'll ask you to please go back to your seat. So at the end of each one, if you want to speak, please stand up and raise your hand, and I can call on you and bring you up. I hope we can get to everyone who wants to speak tonight, but it's entirely possible that we won't. We have quite a crowd here. Yeah, I think that's it. Points of order, right. So if you want to make a point of order, just stand up, like Daniel said, and just raise your hand. I'll call on you, just like that. Yeah. So let's start with our Father. And Father, and Son, and Holy Spirit. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. All right, let's have a good debate. The floor would like to recognize Dr. Granger from the affirming side. And the motion for tonight is...
All right. Is there an official timer yet? So let me be very clear about what we are and are not debating tonight. Here's what we're not debating. We're not debating the morality of smoking marijuana. If you thought you were going to come here and get the affirmative from Dr. Bruinger that smoking marijuana is morally acceptable, you are going to be sorely disappointed. I do not think smoking marijuana is morally acceptable. The debate that we're debating tonight is whether or not the government should be regulating whether or not individuals smoke marijuana. That's the debate. Here's what I suspect. I suspect the opposition is going to lay all sorts of arguments on the table. They're going to lay arguments about how smoking cannabis harms your memory, how it can cause or prompt certain sort of psychedelic experiences. None of this matters because there is a distinction between the morality of a thing and the legality of a thing. They're related, yes, but distinct. And the question before us tonight is, should the government have the regulatory authority to tell you not to smoke marijuana? And here's going to be the bar that I think the other side has to meet. If they convince you that marijuana is harmful enough to you, in an immediate, grave, bodily or psychological way, keep that in mind, immediate, grave, bodily or psychological way, if they prove that, then we should also be regulating alcohol. Alcohol should be illegal in all 50 states as well. Because the bottom line is, being drunk is significantly more harmful in an immediate, grave, physical and psychological way than being high. Now listen, that does not, again, the COO of the university is here. I need to be very clear. Dr. B is not saying you can smoke marijuana morally. In fact, I think it's immoral. Here's why. I think it's immoral because you give up your natural capacity to reason. Just like being drunk. Why is drunkenness a sin? Because you give up your capacity to reason. Rather, not the capacity, but the actual ability, rather. The same holds true for marijuana. But the question is, can the government regulate it? So, 2013, New York state legislator wanted to, the so-called soda ban. Do you remember this? They wanted to say you couldn't buy a soda that was larger than 16 ounces. Why? Sugar drinks. People are dying from diabetes all the time. Diabetes is a health crisis. But who here wants to have their soda, the size of their soda, regulated by the government? Who here wants that? Yeah, give me that again. You can only have 16 ounces of that cola, Katie. Seltzer water, right? You can only have 16 ounces because you might get diabetes. Here's the thing. There are all sorts of things in our lives that are immoral that the government doesn't regulate. Gluttony. Gluttony is immoral. Should the government tell you how many plates of food you can get in a restaurant? That's right. Another example. Many of us in this room believe that premarital sex is immoral. But should the government have a law regulating premarital sex? Right? The government's regulatory authority should be limited. And it should be limited to preventing us from doing things that cause a grave, immediate, bodily threat or psychological threat. That should be the bar that has to be reached in order to make a drug illegal. I think all 50 states should have the right to have recreational marijuana use. I think states should be able to regulate that as they see fit. That does not mean that I think that people should smoke marijuana. I don't. Again, I don't. But I do think that we can't have a nanny state in which the government regulates every possible immoral thing that you could do. Here. The government should have a limited capacity and regulate immediate, grave, bodily and psychological harms. Marijuana does not meet that threshold. How many people die every year from acute alcohol consumption, alcohol poisoning? Many people. How many people die every year from acute cannabis intoxication? 0. 0. Now, are there harmful effects?
1 minute.
Are there harmful effects? There are. But those effects do not reach anything like the bar that drunkenness or alcohol intoxication reaches. The number of people killed in car accidents that get Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which is essentially like drinking yourself into dementia. Violence and aggression, right? Alcohol decreases the activity in the prefrontal cortex. Those are your moral brakes. Don't hit that guy. When you're drunk, you say, hit that guy, right? Weed you're not as violent, right? The violence isn't there, the aggression isn't there. The motoric disability, the inability to control as well, we're significantly more motorically impaired from alcohol. If we have to regulate marijuana, we have to regulate alcohol, and I do not think the government has a right to do that.
The chair would like to recognize Dr. McKenna from the opposing side.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for coming to participate in this wonderful debate. I come to you sober. I am not stoned, which means I'm not under the influence of marijuana consumed either for a recreational purpose or a medical purpose. Because marijuana can do you no good. Don't hear the opposite of it. It is a Schedule I narcotic. That is a distinction made by the Drug Enforcement Agency, our government, which does have some purpose in our lives, which is to protect us from certain things. And what unifies Schedule I narcotics is that they have the potential to do grave harm to you. Marijuana is not the only Schedule I narcotic. Heroin is, ecstasy, LSD, peyote. They are all unified as Schedule I narcotics that we know very clearly can do you no good. The biological consequences are catastrophic. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but what I want to focus in on is their addictive properties. How much addiction are we going to tolerate as our society? And does our government have a role to prevent more addiction to come into our society? All right? In this room, we had great attendance. They said that they sat the room for 100 people. There's probably 150 more. There's probably 10 or 20, 50 more than outside. Let's say there's 150 people. If we all began recreational marijuana use today, 15 of us would be habitual marijuana users. We would need marijuana daily to function. We would have withdrawal symptoms if we stopped our consumption of marijuana. Which 15 would you like to be that take that addiction on? Because an addict does not contribute to society. And addicts' God-given gifts are kept from society. And worse, the addict is a drain to society. Financially, spiritually, they weaken our society. How much addiction will we tolerate? Now, the other point that I need to make is that marijuana has detrimental effects. That is clear also. This push right now to legalize marijuana does not come from a scientific community that has proven with great certainty that marijuana can do you no harm. No, it is driven by a popular demand by a group of people, many of us, 94%, some studies say, are in favor of legalizing marijuana. not buttressed by any scientific fact. In fact, our best and brightest that we charge to care for our health, our physicians, they stand against the legalization of marijuana. The American Association of Pediatrics, the American Medical Association, firmly against the legalization of recreational marijuana. Because the studies are clear. With chronic use, you will see memory issues. You will see decreases in IQ, especially if you start at a young age. What we don't appreciate oftentimes is our brain is not ready to go when you're born. We teach our brain how to function. Our eyesight is a great example. Do you know if you're born with a cataract, if you have an opacification of your lens, that even though you have a healthy retina, you will never see? Even if you take that cataract out years later, you have to teach yourself how to see. Your brain is plastic. It is flexible. It is learning up to the age of 21. Marijuana use attacks that and weakens that. The last point that I want to make is that marijuana legalization has a lot to do with making a lot of money. Okay? All right? Colorado was one of our first states to legalize marijuana recreationally.
1 minute.
All right? The first year that that happened, first year that they had recreational marijuana, $17 million in revenue. That was in 2013. In 2017, $1.3 billion in revenue. 1.3 billion. This is a big money industry that is targeting you, giving you a solution to your problems, telling you very clearly, you're not good enough, and I can make you feel better. And by the way, what I'm making you feel better with, you're going to need for the rest of your life, because you haven't learned how to make yourself better. But I will give you what you need. Audience, it is the Soma holiday. It can do you no good. I urge you to vote against the legalization of marijuana in the remaining states.
Chair now is recognized Mr. Shirley for the floor.
Hey guys. I'm here tonight because David Willey promised me free weed and it's not here. I'm kidding. I don't smoke weed. Don't tell my mom I made that joke. So I just want to reaffirm what Dr. B came up and said. There are a few things that this argument is not about. Thomas Aquinas tells us that the law should not attempt to restrict all immoral acts, all vices, he goes so far as to say. To do so would pose an undue burden on the virtuous. He doesn't care about the vicious. He says an undue burden on the good people. And it would also cause greater evil. So if not all immoral acts should be illegal, this is not a moral argument. Otherwise, Aquinas said, the only things that should be illegal from an immoral standpoint are those that pose an immediate threat, a grievous danger to society. He cites murder, theft. If he was alive today, he'd probably cite wearing a Donald Trump tank top. So this is not a moral argument. Furthermore, it was brought up the health risks of marijuana. I'll tell you some other things that have health risks that we probably like. Tobacco. I smoked a pipe yesterday. Alcohol. I had a beer last night. McDonald's. I get a haircut 5 times a week. So health risks are of no consequence unless we want to restrict fast food and our booze. Furthermore, dangers to society posed by those who have consumed something in excess cannot be regarded as Valid. Alcohol, tobacco, both potentially pose dangers when consumed in excess. But you don't have to consume them in excess. No one's legislating we all go get high and drive cars around. No one's calling for that. The addictive qualities of marijuana were also mentioned. Alcohol is incredibly addictive. Alcoholism is a very serious threat. Alcohol is not illegal, nor should it be. Tobacco is incredibly addictive. Tobacco is not illegal, nor should it be. So the question at hand is not, will people get hurt? Is not, will people become addicted? It's simply that, does marijuana, when consumed in a moderate amount, which that's the main distinction I will make between marijuana and other narcotics such as heroin, you don't consume a moderate amount of heroin. You don't do it. There's no such thing. Hey guys, just come on over, we're going to have a social shoot-up of heroin. No one says that because it's crazy, because it's horrible. A moderate amount, that's what we're talking about. Whether that amount of consumption poses a serious, grievous threat to society. I propose that it doesn't. I guess we're going to decide it right here, right now after this, so that's all I have.
The chair would like to recognize Ms. Montez to the floor.
Hello, is this on? Oh, it is. Hi. How are you all doing tonight? Good? So, good. All right, well, tonight I want to make 3 points on why we should be against the legalization of marijuana. Now, the opposing side has said that the marijuana does not cause an undue harm to the good people. However, I would like to make the point that marijuana is an industry. Colorado is a great example of this. Okay? It is an industry that targets the poor and the marginalized in our community. This is a privileged white person's debate. Okay? The reason being is that studies have shown that, for example, we're going to take Colorado as an example, since this was the first state that really pushed for and legalized marijuana. They promised that revenue would go to schools. They promised that crime rates would decrease because everybody would have the same, and there wouldn't be this issue of, people of color being incarcerated disproportionately to people of white who have the same usage levels, okay? What has happened, the facts that have been noted, all oppose that, okay? Hospitalizations of children who have consumed marijuana by accident increased. Poison control center calls increased, okay? The revenue that they got, it didn't go to schools. Are you kidding me? It was 1.18% of the entire revenue. That's minuscule considering the detriment to the community that it causes. Now, not only that, but the industries, where did they congregate the most? It wasn't in the upscale, nice neighborhoods. No, it was in the areas where poverty and crime were rampant. Marijuana targets the people in our society who need help, not the ones who can control themselves, or supposedly, not the ones who are middle-class Americans, white families who maybe get together and have a nice little smoking party. You know what I mean? It's targeting people who are trying to raise families, who are trying to get jobs, and what have we shown? Marijuana is a detriment to that. You have a harder time getting a job if you have marijuana on your record. If you've got if you were arrested, that makes it harder for you to get a job. Okay? Colorado is a great example. So the District 3 chairman for Denver, Paul Lopez, said that some of these poor communities don't have grocery stores, but they've got pot shops. Okay? How is that fair? How as compassionate humans, can we stand by and allow legislature that is going to be a detriment to communities who need our help? That's not good. Okay? We're not arguing the morality of this. We're arguing whether it would be legal to allow people to habitually harm themselves. Okay? It is an industry that attacks the weakest in our community who need us to support them and to help them, not to further hinder them. Okay? So, I would encourage you all, as I'm going to guess the majority of you are Catholic, and most of you are probably compassionate, okay? I would encourage you to vote against the legalization of marijuana. If you care about the poor in your communities, if you care about the crime rates in your communities or in the communities around you in your state, if you care about that, you wouldn't want to pass this law. Going back to Colorado as an example, we were told that crime rates will decrease. No, that's not what happened. Studies have shown, statistics and fact, cold hard facts have shown crime rates have increased, arrests have increased, and the black market that was supposed to be eradicated is still there, and it's still going just as strong as it was before. So this legalization of marijuana has done nothing except harm. Okay? One of the senators from Denver also said that. So when we legalized marijuana, we're supposed to go to school, right? So he said, the legalization of marijuana has brought nothing to our schools but marijuana. No duh. What did you expect? Okay? So it's stuff like this. We have to get off of our idealistic, fantastical view of what marijuana should be for privileged white Americans and start looking at the communities around us. Who is it hurting? Not only that, the facts go on and on, right? So there's a psychiatrist at Yale University who said that it's very interesting that the people who are lobbying for marijuana are a very small consumer group. Very small consumer group, okay? It's not even going to the people who are lobbying for it, not as much. You know who it's going to? The poor and the marginalized. Do we really want to hurt them more? No, we need to be helping them. If you want to get to the root of the problem, look at incarceration and recidivism laws. Figure out what to do with people who have been incarcerated for it. If you are in possession of marijuana, you haven't smoked it. You have to get to the heart of the problem and figure out what the actual solution is. This marijuana is a band-aid solution, and I would encourage you all to argue against for the good of our community. Thank you.
Alright, so we're going to open up the floor now to anyone who wants to speak. So if you want to speak, please stand up, and you in the back, just raise your hand. There's a lady in the front here.
Just talk about it. Good evening, my name is Carol Sherbaum, and I am a graduate of Franciscan University with a bachelor's in Human Services and master's in counseling. Graduated in 2002. Since that time, I've spent the last 18 years, 19 years now, working in the area of drug and alcohol prevention and drug and alcohol counseling. My concern when it comes to the legalization of marijuana is incredible. Okay, number one, with the amount of revenue that it brings in, we generally end up spending about $10 for every $1 that we get in services to those who have been harmed by it. Is it grave? Is it immediate? As a matter of fact, yes, sir, it is. The DUI rates have shot up in the areas and places where it has been legalized. I would submit to you that those who have crashed in one of those accidents have had immediate grave harm done to them, and their victims, and anyone that has been hit by them, has had that same immediate grave harm, which is deadly. Number two, when it comes to the fact that medical marijuana already exists in all 50 states, there is a drug out there called Marinol, M-A-R-I-N-O-L, that is used, so we already have it. Edible marijuanas are really scary to me. They're being made in the forms of things that look like these little raspberry gummies that you get and all those kinds of things, and the brownies. And talk about immediate grave danger. Some kids thought it'd be really funny to give grandma some edibles. Grandma ended up in the ICU in a coma for 3 days. Had that been my butt as a kid, my Catholic mother would have kicked it from here till next Tuesday. Okay? Let alone what my grandfather would have done when I hurt my grandmother. This is the reality. This drug is insidious. It is a lot like tobacco. It doesn't give you sometimes some of those immediate death threats like the heroines and like the cocaines, or the clients that I've had that have died from things like inhalants, heroin, etc. It may not have that immediate effect, okay, but it is long-term. It is insidious. It is unfortunately deadly, and it does screw up your brains when it comes to things like learning and memory, which, in case your parents haven't told you recently, right now, if you're a student, that's your job. That is your number one job. Thank you. When it comes to legalization and how well the government can do to regulate it, let's really take a look here. How many of you ever drank under the age of 21? Please do not raise your hands, I don't want to know. How many of you ever smoked a cigarette under the age of 18? Please do not raise your hands, I do not want to know. Alcohol, the bootlegging industry, when we stopped that, we said, let's go ahead and legalize and get all of the taxes on it. What happened? The bootleggers then turned to things like drug runners. And now they're turning to things like human trafficking. I can sell a kilo of Coke that fast. I can sell a human being thousands of times. When you legalize one thing that is detrimental to society, you will introduce other things. When it comes to marijuana and legalizing it, is that going to decrease the black market industry? As a matter of fact, some of the stats are starting to show that the drug cartels have seen a 40% decrease in their marijuana. Yay! But did they say, hey, let's go to the Mexican Riviera and retire? No. They've amped up their volume of methamphetamines, and they're dumping them into West Virginia, Ohio, and in the United States. They're dumping them as fast as they can at a very low amount, a low selling point to get you and to get them a new customer. How do I know this? I treat people. I love my clients. They're good people. They want to do good things. But once the addiction takes hold, that addiction that is immediate, grave, and dangerous, cunning, baffling, and powerful. It takes people who are good and kind and decent and hardworking and makes them drive their car when they're high and their kid is in the back seat. That is immediate, grave, and dangerous. There's nothing good about it. My one client, though, God bless him, years ago, he was getting ready to leave. He had 6 months clean from marijuana. I was so proud of him. And he was telling me about all these jobs he was getting as a construction person. I said, that's really great. And I was really dumb. I was a rookie at the time. And I said, well, yeah, but, you know, it was winter. And don't you not get a lot of jobs in construction in the winter? And the same side of my brain went, I can't believe you just handed him the silver plate of all excuses. Recovery had taken over, and he looked at me straight in the eye. He said, no, Carol, I could always get jobs. I just didn't want them. Now his interior motivation, the interior motivation that he had to do better was better because his brain was now back to being fully functioning and clean. And by God, he was alive. Thank you. I'll take questions, yes. Sure.
Excuse me.
Can we ask questions?
Sure. Yes.
Okay.
All right. Any questions?
I have a question for Dr. McKenna, actually. Yeah, so Dr. McKenna, what do you think the likelihood is of, if it was legalized, marijuana was legalized, of people being able to take it? What's the likelihood that they would take it to an extent of not getting high? Like if it was sold in smaller amounts. Is that a likely outcome of legalization? Or do you think people would still take it in the degree to get high?
Yeah, I think that it's an excellent question, and I would argue, I would concede the point. I think it'll be equivalent to what you see with alcohol. It's my own personal opinion, but it's still going to create a population of addicts. So the majority of people are going to use it recreationally, and there's going to be a small percentage that are going to abuse it. And then you just have to ask whether you feel that that is a reasonable thing to tolerate, and is our own personal, individualistic desire for pleasure greater than preserving the health of the few that are addicted to that substance.
All right, do we have any questions for our last speaker? All right, so anyone else wants to speak and stand up? Chair recognizes the gentleman here.
Thank you. I'm for the affirming side, you can tell because I'm really well dressed. So I just need to, I need to take on the idea that marijuana as an industry is a really bad thing. Industries are what make America. When you come to America, a free market capitalism, you have a business, you make it into a corporation. It's what happens. The idea that they're systematically targeting the poor, the disenfranchised, that's not something the government can regulate. The government does not regulate businesses based upon having a target audience. Hear, hear. The government doesn't go to Home Depot and say, because you target middle-aged white people, you do that. How ridiculous does that sound? Insane, right? So that's the first point that I really want to make, is this idea that industry is evil. It's honestly an appeal to the emotional idea of capitalism is evil. They're godless corporations. So I really the second thing is that I've heard twice tonight, nothing good comes from marijuana. It's not my position to agree with that or disagree with that. For the sake of the debate, I'm not going to. I hold a very similar position to Mr. Sherman. What I do need to point out is the government does not regulate things based on if they do no good. Pornography does no good. The government does not regulate because it is not an immediate, drastic, what's the last? All right. Grave, thank you. Immediate, drastic, and grave danger. Here. Hold on, I lost my train of thought. Which brings us back to, if you're going to regulate marijuana the way we've been doing it, it's only fair if you do it the same way as alcohol and tobacco and sugar. Because while the effects are not the same, the way that they play out is similar. The way that the addiction can play out is similar. Actually, I'm going to start sugar on that list for the addiction. But the point still stands is, it's not a matter of not doing good. It's a matter of immediate, drastic, grave evil. And that is when the government stops things. The government stops terrorist attacks, stops heroin. Immediate, drastic, grave evil. Marijuana does no good. It does not fall into that category. And my last point is, I want to remind everybody, it's a debate about political science, not about morality. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for our speaker here? Is this lady in the back?
The last thing you said there is not a debate about morality, it's a debate about. Last thing, which would lead into what I want to do here. It's not a debate about morality, it's a debate about political science. Is it possible to make that dichotomy completely? It seems they're definitely different maybe in some ways, but wouldn't you want to say politics ultimately is about the good? So then we have to go around it.
I completely agree with you. However, for the sake of this debate, as I said in the beginning, we're not bringing morality into it, which is why I'm steering this strictly sexually.
Okay. Well, I guess if that's true, then I answer the legalizing or not legalizing of it, you would first have to answer, is it good or is it bad? And to answer that, you'd have to figure out exactly what it is. It seems clear to me the
It's
abuse
supposed
of
to
it is
be a
bad.
question.
Point of order, point of order.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is this a question?
Is that allowed or not?
Is it, no, it's just a question for just one. If you want to speak, then you can stand up later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, then I'll stand up later.
All right. All right, do we have any other questions for Dr. McKenna?
So specifically to the point of revenue generation. And so my question to you is, have we not learned from the tobacco industry that the tobacco industry made great amounts of money? As we learned the risks of tobacco, we knew that tobacco needed to be better regulated, and that we were killing our citizens with tobacco use. Knowing more at the beginning with marijuana usage, are we not compelled to act differently in terms of the type of industry that we will allow to prey upon us?
It's my opinion that the same way as tobacco should have been researched and regulated before it was instated in the modern corporate world, so marijuana should be as well.
Here. We have gone a little over time for the questions, I'm sorry. So does anyone else want to stand up and speak? All right. Chair recognizes, I guess, the man in the back. Yes, yeah, just come forward, please.
That's far enough. So my question is, first I would say, it seems clear that, or before that, so it seems to me to answer the question about legalizing it or not legalizing it, you'd want to know, well, is it good or bad for the people? And it seems clear to me that the abuse of it is bad, just as the abuse of anything is bad. So that's not the question I want to ask about. I want to ask, is in itself good or bad? And I'm not exactly going to answer that immediately, but I'm going to say, to answer that question, you need to know exactly what is it and how does it affect people. And maybe it'll affect people in a way where no possible use of it is good for a person. Maybe it's a thing, well, there's some sort of good involved, but that's outweighed by the bads. But I think that you need to answer that question. You need to understand what it is before you could really know exactly how to go about regulating or not regulating or this or that. So, I guess that's all I have to say.
Do we have any questions for him? Chair would like to recognize Mr. Miller.
To your point, yes, we should consider the objective good or evil of the action. But at the same time, is premarital sex good or evil?
Evil.
Do you want the FBI to knock down your door in search of
A question, please.
Well, that was
It's not a dialogue, it's just a single question.
all right.
My question is, if you and your girlfriend are getting on, do you want the
If that were happening, I would probably say I wouldn't want that to happen, but that doesn't mean, that's a hard question. For example, to show that it's a difficult question, I know in the past things like adultery used to be illegal. Now I think that's probably a good law that adultery is illegal. So it's not, an example, it's a complicated question, so I don't really know the answer for you.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. All right. Oh, okay.
For those that are talking about, whether or not they should be legalized and saying, the government doesn't regulate heroin, sometimes it does. So at what point do we start to seriously look at our laws and say, how can we truly enforce this? And how can we truly educate people on the risks and dangers so that they can make true decisions?
I do just want to bring up that the questions are for the speakers only. All right, so, does anyone else want to, thank you for speaking. Anyone else want to move forward?
Hey there. Yes, we are all Catholic, right? And the Catholic understanding of political science and morality in general is that all law legislates morality. You can take any theology class, you will have eternal law, divine law, natural law, and positive law. So if you want to be Catholic, you have to accept the proposition that all law legislates morality. And a Catholic principle of morality is the principle of double effect. And that principle explains and shows why. There are reductios, so their debating technique is, oh, alcohol is wrong, but we do not make it illegal, therefore we should not make marijuana illegal. That's a reductio. So you have a proposition, you have an entailment, the entailment is absurd, therefore the original proposition is absurd. The problem with this is that they did not show this is a reductio ad absurdum. And why? Because of the principle of double effect. So something can be allowed if it has a good effect. Does sugar have a good effect? Yes, it does. Sugar allows you, it's a carb. Sugar is not bad per se. It's bad if you have an excess of it, okay? And this goes with wine, for example. Does wine have a good effect in itself? Yes, the taste of wine is a good thing, okay? Marijuana is taken for the purpose of getting high. Nobody smokes marijuana for the taste of it. The reason why somebody takes marijuana is the highness, and the highness is wrong. Therefore, they're absurdum. They're reductio, not a reductio ad absurdum. Second thing, when we talk about the example of premarital sex, every law, to be a legitimate law, has to be reasonably enforced. So the issue of the premarital sex cannot be the law, a possible law, would not be reasonably enforced. It cannot, it just cannot. You cannot put cameras in a house, that's not reasonable. While it's very reasonable to make marijuana illegal, it's so reasonable that now in America it is illegal. So I would say the reductios are not absurd, and therefore the original propositions are valid. So their examples are just non sequiturs, like they do not follow. Yeah, thank you.
Drunk driving, do we not? So if I want to smoke a blunt in my house, what's the problem? That's illegal right now, is it not?
I suppose.
So you said the laws against premarital sex don't follow because you can't put cameras in every house and see what people are doing in their homes. If I'm blazing up at home, obviously, if we made weed legal, we would have laws against operating motor vehicles while under the influence, the same way we do with alcohol now.
Exactly. That's why it's made illegal, so you can prevent that. That's a reasonable way in which it can be enforced. And enforcing a reasonable law does not mean that the outcome is always positive, but it's a reasonable way by which it can be enforced. And the outcome does not happen to be always positive. That's why we have, I would say, jails and prisons. If the laws were have always positive outcome, we would not have any societal issues, I think. So I don't think that's a good argument.
I'm wondering if you could think for us of any possible other reason besides wanting to get high that somebody might use marijuana.
Well, there are good reasons, and the reasons are, for example, maybe medical ones. But this is not the issue. The original issue was it should be legal for recreational purposes. So the general answer would be yes, but for this debate, for this context, I would say no.
All right, we have time for one question. All right. Anyone else? Thank you for speaking. Next question.
Hi, everybody. I'm not really comfortable speaking in front of a lot of people, but you know, I'm doing my best here. So really quickly, I just wanted to ratify what somebody else had said about, or what Ame had said about the government basically taking over things like what we do in the bedroom, right? First off, it would be impossible to do. Second, I would tentatively say, in my opinion, that it actually would be in the government's best interest to monitor things like human sexuality when it comes to things like the family, which is the basis of our society and all societies throughout history. Like the proper, the proper unity of man and wife for the purpose of offspring. So, I mean, in that instance, when it comes to family and things like that, we see with the disintegration of the family, we see first off, greater crime rates. We see higher drug usages. A lot of these things are usually driven by people who have severe emotional trauma, lack major formative experiences in their lives, say father figures or people to be nurturing to them in their formative years. Going back a little bit, so my experience, I've not partaken of the weed. But I have had an experience with it. I was in court one time because I had crashed my car. I had not partaken of the booze either. I bumped into somebody going 5 miles an hour, and well, they made the cop. They told the cop basically I was trying to murder them. So I had to go to court, and this girl got up in front of me first to go to court, and she gets up and she's like, "Wow," her mother's trying to drag her up there, and the judge says, "Now this is the 5th time you've been caught, with a DUI, smoking marijuana in your truck." She's like, "Yeah." "Do you plan on stopping anytime soon?" And she's like, "No." I'm like, this girl's making me look like a saint. This is great. And her mother's just up there just shaking her head. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? And she gets up, the judge is sort of like, I don't even know what to do. He just gives her a fine, and he's like, whatever. And I get up there, and it's fine, whatever. And he's just like, thank goodness. You look sorry for what you've done. So I always look. But it was just a funny encounter to just, I've known several people throughout my life who have used marijuana, sadly, in a recreational fashion. I understand the uses of marijuana for an emotional purpose, right? I think that kind of misses a huge ethos of the Catholic perspective, which is redemptive suffering. And I do not mean to say through pain. Okay, we're not just trying to be masochists here, just suffer, okay? Like, there's a reason why we take opioids. I had surgery earlier this year, and I took opioids, and they were most helpful. They were very helpful. But at the same time, what we're talking about here, especially when it comes to like emotional, okay? We don't want to just, kind of wipe our minds, not be able to feel anything. We want to be able to deal with different things and, see, psychologists and other people who are, help us out figure things out, okay, out there. Crazy. So I would say that, so for medical use, I see limited help. At least when it comes to kind of the emotional issue, I think there can also become an emotional dependence on that. I've definitely encountered that in friends. I've been very sad to see that. As we also know, reason and all that, affecting that company now. Anyways, and so, to conclude, I would say, first, whether or not the government, is going to regulate it, I think it should. I think that it directly affects society, creates an outlet which is not going to be conducive to society, certainly not uplifting or building to society, which is a serious question for legislation, whether or not it will really build society. I think that in one instance this is sort of like a dam, so maybe not just to open the floodgates yet. Just to wrap up, I think that the uses are limited. I don't think they really go into recreational usage. I don't really think that we should legalize it. Thank you very much for your attention.
the government should regulate the love between a father, son, husband, wife, and their children. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Well, you did just clarify and say that they would govern their love. I don't know exactly how they're going to do that. The will is pretty hard to control. I mean, God doesn't even try to go towards that.
Well, the
No, I mean-
covenantal relationships, though, you believe they should have governing power over.
Oh, certainly. I mean, if you, I mean, obviously you see social services taking kids away from abusive parents, and I think the argument is easily made towards homosexuality, which is detrimental to the family and ultimately society itself, which is built off the family and the proper, father and mother, and the way that they form their children. And, strong fathers make strong daughters, and I mean, it's just sort of like strong daughters marry good men and get good families.
And so you think the government's methods right now are truly effective enough?
Just 2 questions, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I don't need that. So my question is, what do you say about the Canadian social services? They're now taking away children from, nice schools and Christian families that aren't teaching them about, how I want to be a woman today. What do you say about that? You see how the government is handling.
I'm sorry, one word. Isn't it supposed to be about recreational marijuana, not family?
Fine, then I'll rephrase my question. Sounds like a bit of vipers. The way you have governments regulating this family in your example, it sounds very totalitarian. And I believe that you said yourself that God doesn't try to control us. And man shouldn't try to control us together. Therefore, I should. If I want, as Mr. Gill said, if I want to look plays up my house.
Please hold us a question.
My question is, come into my house and tell me what I can and can't do regarding their home.
Because what you do directly affects society. We are not an island. We directly affect one another. Ultimately, the decisions we make really affect. I mean, we are a family. Society is a family, built off of family, but ultimately an extended family, especially as Catholics, a universal family. So, what we do behind closed doors does not stay behind closed doors. It comes out with you and meets us all in the classroom and in the marketplace.
Next speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, every man dies, but not every man really lives. We heard these quotes from William Wallace when he was the great Scotsman defender in the 1300s taking on the British Empire. And today, as a member of the opposition, I will be taking on the affirmative side and very clearly asking this question that each and every one of you must answer. To what extent may the government allow us to constrain our lives?
Hear, hear.
Here, here.
To what extent is the government allowed to constrain our lives, and to what extent are we allowed to destroy them? I want to reframe this debate and bring it back to the philosophical principles that were presented originally by the illustrious Dr. Bruninger. Of course, however, I will be siding with my ever more illustrious father, Dr. That being said, let's talk about these principles, right? So we've heard them: drastic, grave, immediate. We need to ask, though, what does that mean? What are the immediate effects that we can see from marijuana? Let's take a look first at the point that Dr. McKenna brought up. This is a level 1 narcotic, even more addictive drugs. So it is already considered by the United States government through scientific research as something that is detrimental to our health to that extent. We can see, and while we might not agree with the US government on everything, that they are still a credible source. And having it on the same level
does mean something. However, the main point that I want to make is one getting back to the point that Mr. Sherman, if I'm not mistaken, made about Aquinas. Aquinas does make very clear, yeah, we are not supposed to legislate every single immorality out of existence. But when we are comparing marijuana with sugar, McDonald's, smoking, and alcohol, and those four examples specifically I want to deal with, that's where I think we draw the line. We've already established that marijuana is a level 1 narcotic. On top of that, I would throw into the debate that there is a causative relationship, causative, not correlative, between recreational marijuana usage and other usage of drugs, in particular heroin. If we take a look at it from that perspective, we can see that there is not only an immediate impact that is detrimental, but on top of that, an impact that is more chronic and more damaging than anything else we can take a look at. Now we get to those four examples. McDonald's. My mom's a nutritionist. I don't eat McDonald's every day. I have some friends that do. They will most likely get fat and die of diabetes at 50. This is detrimental to the United States. But is it as detrimental as marijuana when it can be causative to heroin usage and overdose? I would make the argument, no. Let's take a look at the example of sugar. If I eat donuts every day, we'll have the same issue. I'll get fat and die at 50. That being said, let's compare it again with marijuana. A level 1 narcotic that has causatively been shown to link to heroin and other drug usage. I don't think we're looking at the same playing field anymore. Let's take a look at the other two big ones, tobacco and alcohol. Tobacco, probably the biggest one. Many of us have friends that are currently addicted to cigarettes, that have seen the nicotine disadvantages, that have seen the disadvantages that come about 50 years later when you die of lung cancer. Once again, we need to take a look at the immediate effects of marijuana. A level 1 narcotic, and the chance of very easily going on other drugs. In conclusion, I want to take a look at that fourth example, alcohol. This is even less than the impact of tobacco. Yes, there are people who are alcoholics. Yes, there are people who ruin their lives because of it. But we cannot compare it to a drug that has a much greater capacity for harm, that has and is addictive for everyone, not just alcoholics, and that can destroy ever more lives. That is the question that we need to reframe this debate around. To what extent may I destroy my own life? And I would make the argument that in order for us to live as truly good human beings, in order for our government to help us live as truly good human beings, we are not only obligated, but we are morally obligated to quelch medical and recreational marijuana in the United States.
Any questions? All right. Thank you for speaking. Oh.
Okay, so you cited the FDA, so a function of the U.S. government, which also prohibited alcohol at one point. And you cited that marijuana is a gateway drug, which is scientifically inaccurate. Aside from those very shaky claims, how is marijuana different from the four substances that you mentioned?
Well, first of all, I would disagree with your assumption that it is not a gateway drug. I think there's clear evidence, both in the press and common knowledge, but on top of that, in medical research to this point, and I believe the affirmative team would agree with me and be able to provide even greater clarification to that end. But on top of that, I think we need to take a look at the four examples you presented, and when I look at comparing them with medical marijuana. Not only the fact of the gateway drug, but the fact of the psychedelic experiences, and on top of that, that is a level 1 narcotic. Comparing that with things like alcohol, McDonald's, sugar, tobacco, I don't think we can compare them on the same level, and I believe that was made very clear throughout my speech.
I noticed the man in the back.
So I have a question. Can you clarify, are you talking about ridding of medical marijuana in just the smoking sense? There's also lotions that are very beneficial to people.
Yeah, I apologize if I use the term medical marijuana. I work in the city of Steubenville where we are dealing with medical marijuana issues specifically. I was focusing mainly on the smoking programs.
Time for one more question. Mr. Denley?
So why do you think it is that marijuana is also a Schedule I drug, as heroin is a Schedule I drug? When heroin kills you, marijuana gives you punches.
I think that's an absolutely valid question. The main argument that I would make is the impact of the psychedelic experiences, but more importantly, the fact that it is a gateway drug, and that we need to treat it as such in the status quo. And to deny it, as the opposite, the affirmative team would argue, is in fact just completely denying common sense.
All right. Chair, let's recognize the lady in the dress there.
So I'm going to start by making the comment that a lot of these speakers have talked about the role of government in regulating our decisions. I want to make 2 points about that. The first point is that government's role in our lives is to promote society, to make sure that it continues to run the way it's supposed to run, but not to go so far as to control our own mental, spiritual, emotional lives. The second point that I want to make is that legalizing marijuana would go against the role of government. That the role of government in preventing the legalization of marijuana prevents those immediate and grave effects that Dr. McKenna so eloquently spoke about earlier, in challenging society. So not only does it make a group of people in society that cannot properly contribute to it, but it also provides a drain on our resources, on our revenue, on the amount of laborers we have in the labor force. It does not promote society, and I would go so far as that it crosses the line to be a detriment to society. And enough of a detriment to society that it cannot be with any, it cannot be legalized with any, we cannot legalize it. I'm sorry. Yeah. I would go so far as to say that we cannot legalize marijuana while continuing to uphold our society's well-being and health. And that is the ultimate role of government. That's it.
Any questions? Wayne back here.
Hello.
Hi, Joe.
So the question is, isn't it good for people's health in society to, say, go to a bar and drink or smoke cigarettes? I mean, in ancient times, they even had like Dionysia where they would do things far, far worse than marijuana as a state-organized thing to blow off steam, right? So why is it in the state's interest to prevent this particular blowing off of steam?
That's an excellent question. I would argue that the difference is that with marijuana, you're not only blowing off steam, but you're also being a detriment and providing a detriment to the people around you. So you're not just blowing off your own steam, but you're also giving other people harmful effects such as having to take care of you, such as secondhand marijuana smoke, such as being a driver under the influence, or losing control of your own ability to rationalize. And I would argue that you just don't always get the same effects with alcohol that you do with marijuana. Yes?
All right. And
A follow-up, if that's all right.
yes, one follow-up.
I would argue, perhaps, that in the case of alcohol, smoking, or other substances, we have laws to regulate circumstances for their use, such as you drink in a bar, you drink in private residence, and you don't operate a shooting Mackenzie. Shouldn't there then just be laws to regulate circumstances under which you are.
Here, here.
This is true. We do have regulatory laws in place for alcohol and for smoking tobacco. I do believe that when you are talking about recreational use of marijuana, that even that use of marijuana inside your own home, this is talking about if regulatory laws were in place and working, that if you had marijuana use inside your own home under certain restrictions, that it would still cause those detrimental effects to society. It would still make you a drain onto society, and it would still cause societal dysfunction and problems.
I guess,
You're here.
Oh, it's not, oh, sorry, no, it's no, it's still question stuff. All right, the man in the back.
Listening to the arguments that you've been making about secondhand marijuana smoke and drivers under the influence, could that same rhetoric be applied to tobacco and alcohol? Like, it has been proven that drunk driving is a major factor in people dying. We have heard it. Like, I'm growing up and read so many, PSAs and things in magazines about, like, don't smoke because you don't want your relatives to get secondhand tobacco smoke. So what makes marijuana different from alcohol and from tobacco in that world?
Yeah, so I'm going to defer to Mr. McKenna's speech, was that we can't put them on the same level because they're of different severity. So secondhand marijuana smoke has different effects than secondhand tobacco smoke. We have studies on that. And as far as drivers under the influence, I think that that Ava over here properly stated in the studies that they've had on Colorado, especially, though I can't claim to be an expert, that driving under the influence with marijuana, it's just an added burden onto driving under the influence with alcohol. And we do have laws, of course, that have brought down driving under the influence with alcohol, such as raising the age of legal alcohol consumption. And I don't think that they were necessarily effective. I think that it would be more effective. Yeah, more effective with marijuana to just not legalize.
All right, thank you for speaking. Also, we're going to have only 2 more speakers left in the open floor period, and we'll move on to the lightning round. So, Mr. Kyler.
Hi, everybody. So, Socrates was killed with hemlock. That was a drug. Not sure what they were doing in the polis back then and what their laws were concerning the use of drugs. But I'm thinking in terms of a more philosophical approach, because I want to back up a little bit. I'm not an expert on all of the particulars, in this debate. As I'm listening, I'm kind of figuring out where I'm at. But it seems that we have to sort of go back to those principles of there's sort of this idea of the role of government and what is the government's role in our society and how far should its power extend into our lives. And we have to distinguish this. Now, I would say that government is not perfect because we live in a temporal world where there's all kinds of evils, it's pretty epic. And so because of that, as we're going through and comparing all these different things like, oh, there's tobacco, and oh, premarital sex, and all of these other things, well, I mean, to an extent, evil's not a good thing, but how far, yeah, that's I don't agree with you. But because of that, my question then goes to the fact of, it's been mentioned, but how effective can a government actually regulate these certain, things. So if it affects a law, like right now in most states, we would say that, well, it's true that, it's illegal. Marijuana use is illegal for most states. But looking at how effective those laws are, is an important aspect of that. And so when we think about the government, according to Aristotle, is to promote both the common good and the good of the individual, because in a sense, society is made up of individuals, right? But also community. Aristotle also says, yes, I know it's Aristotle, but he's still relevant. But he also says that man, by nature, is social. And I'm trying to remember if it was Mr. Hahn who pointed out that because of that, what we do in our individual lives, it is going to affect other people. Because we're social and we have interactions with other people, that's a given. And so because of that, we really have a responsibility and a right and therefore a duty to really consider what the difference between these laws would be, whether we legalize marijuana or not, and what the effects of those really are in terms of the principles that Dr. Bruninger laid out before, in terms of the well-being of the community and the well-being of the individual. Another thing I want to touch on is the idea of the big business, the capitalistic approach, and because we live in a society that is capitalistic, I think that the government, I know Mr. Orsay said that the government doesn't have a right to, come into Home Depot and regulate, house plants being sold to white people or something. That has no real implication. But I think there are certain there are certain things like marijuana that does have potential to be very detrimental to the community. And so I think because of the fact that marijuana, especially because of the evidence produced or shown regarding Colorado, I think because of that, if that sort of seems to be one of the biggest ends, is it's kind of these private people pushing for a consumer society where they can make a huge profit, I think that the government actually should have a big role in stepping in there and saying, no, we promote the common good, and therefore we have a duty as the government to say, to stop this, because that's the main end, of sort of what's happening with this marijuana use. So I just want you guys to think about that.
All right, here, any questions for the speaker? Man back there.
Given that this same Aristotle said one of the chief common goods for people to follow was individual leisure time, how does that shape?
How does my loud voice sound? Good. How does that shape your understanding of marijuana in the light of leisure as a common good for the people?
That's a great question. And the way that I would answer that is that I would have to argue that there are certain things that have a great potential to do incredible harm. And so because marijuana is something that has potential to be very, very, very detrimental to both the individual and then the society when it gets out, outside of the doors of the house, so to speak, and really affects that, I think that because of that, that would be something that should be prohibited on that principle.
All right, thank you for speaking. Sorry, we don't have any more time for questions, but we do have time for one more speaker for the open floor. Chair recognizes.
Oh, you're too good. I'm going to be very, very brief. The government cannot legislate idiocy among its people. The people that are going to be committing crimes and doing things while under the influence of marijuana are going to be the same people that are going to be committing crimes under drugs that are then illegal. It throws another thing into the mix, but we don't make laws in order to inhibit, for the virtuous, basically. I'm sorry, I'm butchering Aquinas there. The same people that would abuse marijuana are going to abuse something else. The only people who are actually inhibiting it are those who are going to enjoy it in a responsible sense. I know, it's just my white person speaking here. But those communities, you can make everything under the sun that's detrimental legal. Those communities are still going to be terrible. There's nothing you can do in regards to that. The family is breaking down. That is true. That's not because marijuana is legal or illegal. Those problems are there long before and long after any decision is made for the legalization of marijuana. And that truly is tragic. And I don't mean to disparage those communities any more than they already are. I'm not trying to beat them down. Those problems are there, and that is the role of the church and our role as Christians in order to help those communities. Regarding legislation, regarding legalization of marijuana, it doesn't change our role in the community, and it doesn't change the fact that those communities will need help. Has anybody looked at Pete Floyd, by the way? We're talking about how marijuana doesn't have any good benefits. You think Bill Gates sat in the rock and made him back? You get my point though. Anyone enjoyed Steam, video games? The guys who made that thing, they were high as kites. I would like to argue, half the music you listen to was written, maybe even performed, while high. And you know what? The world's all better for it. I love weed. I think it's pretty great. And I would absolutely legalize weed if it means I get all my weed for it. Any questions?
I'll admit I don't know very much about marijuana, but I do know that when you do something over and over again, it becomes a habit. Maybe not addictive, but a habit. So if you were to say that we legalized marijuana and people would enjoy it recreationally, synonymous to alcohol, that they wouldn't become accustomed or even addicted to it after using it time and time again.
Well, it's like you said, it's like alcohol. You become an alcoholic, and I'm sure you're going to become addicted to weed. But I am very skeptical of any, because gateway theory, a lot of people fight over that, and I don't know the consensus, because both sides, I think, would be wrong to say that whatever studies come out are slanted in their direction. You're going to have some really far people who think that marijuana is evil. And if you want to talk about something, you want to talk about tobacco and stuff like that, they fund a lot of stuff to keep the weed out of the industry so they can have them not prepare. A lot of people who smoke tobacco but get into weed. They don't want it legalized. And then we have our pothead scientists who want it legalized for whatever reason. There's a lot of money to be made, and there's a lot of money to be made on both sides. So the science of it is very, very murky. And so in regards to your question, though, I would say you become just as likely in regards to smoking weed as you would alcohol.
In regards to the government's job in regulating the widespread idiocy of our population.
Yes.
What then is the purpose of a DWI, or better yet, the legal requirement of public education and its inherent responsibility to prevent idiocy?
Well, those things are legal, and I agree. Those things are good. But if we're defining idiocy, a lot of people like to define idiocy as trying to enjoy that thing. So I agree. If we were to legalize marijuana, there should be rules in regards to operating motor vehicles and things like that. The problem is that's being lumped in with a huge amount of, even Dr. Kennemeyer's own admission said that a lot of people would enjoy it in a way that wouldn't be extremely detrimental, and only a small portion, if I'm correct, you can say that, and a small portion would abuse that. So idiocy by the opposition is being defined as using it at all, whereas mine is the standard idiocy that we have now, which would be getting high and then driving a car or doing something stupid.
All right, thank you. on to the lightning round now. So this is just, you only have 2 minutes to talk and no questions after. So yeah. All right. The chair would like to recognize down here.
Okay, so I'm going to start out today by talking about why the idea and arguments for making marijuana legalized in all 50 states is a little half-baked. We've been talking about things like McDonald's, we've been talking about alcohol and tobacco, right? We all say those things are addictive, which they are. Marijuana is too. But we don't just regulate things that are addictive. We regulate things that can cause severe harm. And I'm going to argue that marijuana can cause severe harm. Marijuana has a condition that can induce psychosis. It's called cannabis-induced psychosis. It's where a person doing marijuana for the first time has a break with reality. Now, when we look at this, this happens in a very small portion of the population. I'm from Canada, where they're going to legalize marijuana in 18 days. And it's going to be legalized across the whole country. It's a real problem now that there's not enough education out there for cannabis-induced psychosis. Now what is this? I'm just going to go through it quickly. It's where you experience a break with reality, and sometimes that break cannot be repaired. Now, we're going to look at marijuana as a product, okay? Not the morality, not the philosophy, but just as a market product. Now, when a product causes harm to anyone, do we say that we should make it available to everyone? So, everyone, who owns a phone? Everyone owns a phone? Snap if you own a phone? Everyone owns a phone. Samsung released phones, they exploded in people's pockets. Boom, happened to a small portion of the phones. Where there are phones are allowed on the market today, are they allowed to explode in people's pockets? They're not. Same thing with marijuana. Even though it happens in a small portion of the population, are we going to allow something that can affect people in a negative way with severe outcome that instantly happens? First time user, dead. Okay? So are we going to allow a product into the market that can affect us significantly the first time, even in a small portion of the population? We don't allow Samsung with their phones, and we don't allow drug companies to introduce drugs that harm us severely. So, thank you.
Chair would like to recognize the lady in the dresser.
So I was hoping to get to expand more on this in the previous round, but I'm going to be short and succinct here. So we haven't really talked much about secondhand marijuana, which has surprised me because it actually is a major threat to many people. There have been many experiments proving this. One in particular, they exposed rats to just 1 minute of both tobacco smoke and marijuana smoke. And actually, there was a very, very surprising result. Not only was marijuana just as deadly in the rats in that 1 minute as far as the effect that it had on them, it took almost 5 times as long for these rats to recover from this negative impact. So if it can do that to rats, imagine what it's doing to people. And wouldn't you argue that people are inherently much more important than rats? I live in California. My neighbors smoked the devil's lettuce that was for your steam on 3 sides of me every single night. I live a mile from the beach. They decided we shouldn't have air conditioning in our house for some reason. So we leave our windows open every single night. And every single night, without fail, our neighbors blaze it up and my house smells like weed for hours. Now, let me tell you, unwanted secondhand highs are freaking real, okay? So, some personal things that prove to me beyond a doubt that secondhand marijuana does exist. My friend had an anaphylactic reaction this summer to weed. Never smelled it in her life before. Smelled it, couldn't go in her house for 2 whole days. Every time she walked in, her face swelled like a balloon. That convinced me. So, while I personally don't believe that the government should completely control marijuana, I do believe that we should at least look into some limitations just for our safety.
All right.
affirming side has an argument, and every argument can be distilled into a syllogism. Okay? They say that basically their argument was that only the things that fall in a certain category, which are things which are gravely and immediately and drastically dangerous, are the ones that have to be forbidden. They would have to be forbidden. And marijuana doesn't fall in this, and therefore it doesn't have to be forbidden. So I would argue that the first premise is wrong. Not only the things that pose a grave immediate danger have to be prohibited. There are lots of things that are not grave and immediate but are still prohibited, like privacy rules, like stalking and other things. They're still prohibited, they're not grave and immediate. So therefore, that's enough. Their argument is flawed. Their syllogism is flawed. Okay. But I can go on. Their concept of state, I think, is, and government, is contract-based. So basically, this is what I think, I hope it's not, but they have probably the idea of a government which is simply a social contract, where people get together, decide rules, and simply guard their freedoms. But government is more than that. Government is actually, if you look in Romans 13, something that has divine authority.